The stars were quiet that night. At the edge of the Empire's territory, far from the shining core worlds, the deep space patrol ship ISV Guardian drifted along its route. Its crew was small, just 20 people, and the job was boring. Day after day, they scanned empty space, checking for smugglers, pirates, or stray asteroids. Nothing ever happened here. Nothing ever changed. Commander Loran sat in the control chair, sipping bitter synth coffee. He stared at the display screens, eyes half asleep. His second officer, Mara, was leaning back, humming an old tune from her home planet. Then the alarms began to scream. The control room lit up with red warning lights. "Energy spike detected," the ship's AI announced in a flat voice. Loran sat up instantly, spilling coffee onto his uniform. "Location?" he barked. "Directly ahead," Mara answered, her eyes wide as she looked at the sensor feed. "It's big, Commander. And it's not on any chart." On the main view screen, space itself seemed to twist. A shimmer of light appeared in the darkness, like a ripple in water. The crew stared in silence. Then, without warning, a ship materialized. It was huge, 3 times the size of the Guardian. Its black hull reflected almost no light, making it look like a shadow carved out of the void. Strange glowing lines ran across its surface, pulsing slowly, as if the ship itself were breathing. No Imperial design looked like this. No known alien design looked like this either. "By the stars," Mara whispered. "Open a channel," Loran ordered. The comms officer tried, but the system hissed with static. "No response, Commander. It's not even acknowledging our signal." The mysterious warship did not move. It simply floated there, silent as if watching them. The crew began to whisper. "Is it a ghost ship?" one muttered. "Pirates?" Another guessed. But deep down, everyone felt the same chill. This was something different, something dangerous. "Scan it," Loran commanded. The sensors swept over the ship. The results came back impossible. No heat signature, no life signs, no known alloy in the hull composition. "Commander, it's like it's not real." Before Loran could reply, the ship moved. No, it didn't move. It was just there 1 second and closer the next, as if it had jumped across the distance in an instant. "Shields up!" Loran shouted. The Guardian's shields flared to life, a thin bubble of blue energy. The warship slowly rotated, and for the first time, the crew saw what could only be its weapon, an enormous cannon mounted under its dark hull. Loran's voice was steady, but his hands were trembling. "Prepare to transmit emergency report to High Command. Mark it as Omega priority." Before they could send the full message, the warship's weapon began to glow. A deep hum filled the air, like the sound of a giant heartbeat. "Fire control ready?" Mara asked, panic creeping into her voice. "Ready, but I don't think it will matter," Loran replied quietly. The glow intensified. The Guardian fired first, 3 plasma bolts that streaked across space and struck the warship's hull. The plasma vanished without leaving so much as a scorch mark. Then, the warship fired. A single beam of white light erupted from its cannon. It didn't explode on impact. It didn't create a shock wave. Instead, the Guardian's shield simply collapsed, and the ship's systems went dead. Lights flickered out. The hum of the engines died. For a moment, they were drifting in darkness, weightless in the cold. Then the emergency backup lights came on. "Damage report," Loran ordered. "Shields gone, weapons offline, engines offline," the engineer reported. His face was pale. "I don't understand. It didn't destroy us, it just shut us down." The warship drifted closer. On the main view screen, they could see strange symbols glowing along its hull. None of the crew recognized them. "Get that message out, now!" Loran ordered. The comms officer worked frantically, using the emergency transmitter. "Signal sent, Commander. Short burst. I don't know if they got it." Then, as suddenly as it had arrived, the warship began to fade. Its shape blurred like smoke in the wind, and then it was gone. Silence filled the control room. Where did it go? Mara whispered. No idea, Loran said, his voice heavy. But if High Command got that message, they'll have questions, and I don't have the answers. The crew didn't know it yet, but this was the first sighting of the ship that would one day bring the Empire to its knees. But that night, all they had was fear. Fear of the unknown. Fear of the silent shadow in the stars. In the heart of the Imperial capital, far from the cold darkness of the border, life moved with a heavy rhythm of power and control. Towering spires reached toward the clouds, and banners of the Empire hung, proudly over every street. Here, in the shining core, the rulers believed themselves untouchable. But that belief was about to crack. The emergency report from the ISV Guardian reached the Imperial High Command 2 days after the encounter. It was short, broken by static, but the few words it contained were enough to make some officers uneasy. Unknown warship, massive, non-imperial design, immediate threat. The rest of the message dissolved into hisses and silence. Admiral Varen, a man with silver hair and a reputation for crushing rebellions, leaned back in his chair as he read the report. Across the polished table, a dozen other admirals and ministers sat in the dim meeting hall. "This is nothing," one minister scoffed. "Probably a smuggler ship with stolen tech." The Guardian's crew exaggerated, but others were not so quick to dismiss it. "Smugglers do not shut down a military patrol ship without firing a single shot," Varen said coldly. "And they certainly don't vanish without a trace." An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Finally, the Emperor himself spoke from his high throne at the end of the hall. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "We will investigate Ida quietly. The last thing we need is panic among the people." The Emperor ordered a small intelligence team to gather all reports from border sectors. Within hours, more strange stories emerged. Traders whispered of a shadow in the stars. Freight captains claimed to have seen a ship appear beside them, only for it to fade away before they could react. Some said it could jump across light years in the blink of an eye. Others swore it was crewed by something not human. In the crowded markets of the outer worlds, fear began to spread. Old sailors told tales of the Phantom of War, a cursed vessel from forgotten times. Young recruits in the Imperial Navy laughed at the idea, but they still checked the shadows on their sensors more often than before. Weeks passed. Then it happened again. A mining station on the edge of the Keylor system sent a distress call. Screams, alarms, the roar of explosions, and then silence. By the time Imperial rescue ships arrived, there was nothing left but drifting debris and fragments of rock where the station had been. Survivors from nearby ships reported the same thing. A black warship, massive and silent, appearing out of nowhere. It fired once, and the station was gone. Then it vanished. The Emperor's private advisors began to worry. "If this is a new enemy," one said carefully, "they are testing us, studying us, and they are choosing their targets with purpose." The Emperor's jaw tightened. He remembered the early days of the Empire's rise, how Earth itself had been taken in a war so brutal, its people scattered across the stars. He remembered the stubborn resistance of humanity before they fell. Could this ship be human? The thought was absurd, but it stayed in his mind. That night, in the private chambers of the Imperial Palace, the Emperor stood alone before a giant star map. His gaze lingered on the outer systems, where the mysterious warship had struck. Slowly, his eyes drifted toward a small, unremarkable star in the far reaches, a star once called Sol. It began without warning. In the cold expanse of the Keylor sector, far from the bustling heart of the Empire, the mining colony of Revo 7 floated quietly above a dusty moon. The workers there were simple people, engineers, miners, cargo pilots. Their only concern was pulling rare metals from the moon's crust and shipping them back to the core worlds. The colony's defense systems were minimal. A few small gun platforms, a shield generator, and a single patrol corvette were all that stood guard. There had never been a serious threat this far out, until that day. At exactly 02:14 station time, the sensors detected something strange. A faint ripple appeared on the outer scan range. It was not an asteroid. It was not a ship jumping in through hyperspace. It was something else. The colony's security officer frowned at the readings. Strange. No hyperspace signature. But it's moving fast! Before he could raise the alarm, it appeared. A black warship, massive and silent, dropped into real space less than 5 kilometers from the colony. Its presence was like a shadow blocking out the stars. No comm signal, no warning, just there. Watching. The station commander's voice came over the comms, sharp and panicked. "All personnel, battle stations, shields up, contact the patrol ship now!" The defense platforms turned toward the intruder. Energy cannons hummed to life, and then the warship moved. It rotated slowly, as if selecting its target. Strange patterns glowed along its hull, lines of light that pulsed like a heartbeat. A single weapon mounted under its hull began to shine. The colony fired first. Energy bolts streaked through the void, hitting the warship head-on. But the impacts vanished as if they had never been. No explosion, no damage, no effect. Then came the return shot. A narrow beam of white light erupted from the warship's cannon. It struck the colony's shield, and in less than a second, the shield was gone, shattered, into nothing. The beam did not stop. It sliced through the colony's central core, through the mining platforms, through the moon's surface itself. In a flash, Rivos 7 was gone. Debris spun silently in space. Small fragments of metal glinted in the distant light of the moon's sun. The warship drifted forward, scanning the wreckage. No survivors were detected, and then, as quickly as it had arrived, it faded. The black hull dissolved into nothingness, leaving empty space behind. The Imperial patrol ship arrived minutes later, only to find destruction. No enemy, no trace, only death. The report they sent to the Imperial High Command was short and grim. Colony destroyed. Unknown warship responsible. Immediate threat to Imperial security. For the first time, the Empire began to understand. This was not a ghost story. This was war. The destruction of Rivos 7 sent a shockwave through the Empire's High Command. For years, the border sectors had been quiet, almost forgotten. But now, a single unknown warship had destroyed a colony in seconds and vanished without leaving a trace. The Imperial investigation began immediately. Fleet Admiral Varenne was placed in charge. He demanded every fragment of sensor data, every witness report, and every scrap of debris recovered from the attack site. At first, the analysts were frustrated. The warship's hull was made of an unknown alloy. Its weapon signature matched nothing in the Imperial database. The ship's energy readings were unstable, shifting as if it did not obey the same physical rules as other vessels. But then, a small discovery changed everything. Among the fragments recovered from the colony's wreckage was a single piece of metal that didn't belong to the mining station. It was smooth, black, and covered in faded engravings. Most of the markings were unreadable, but one symbol was clear. It was a circle, divided into blue and white halves with small red lines cutting through it. Old historians in the Imperial archives recognized it instantly. It was an ancient insignia from Earth. The room had fallen silent when the symbol was confirmed. Humanity had been conquered by the Empire nearly 300 years ago. Their fleets had been destroyed, their homeworld stripped of its resources. The survivors were scattered across the galaxy as slaves or laborers, and yet, here was a peace. of a warship bearing their mark. Some officers dismissed it. "It's impossible," they said. "The humans have no fleets left. This must be an old wreck, stolen and rebuilt by pirates." But others were not so sure. Admiral Varon remembered the old war records. Humanity had fought harder than any other race the Empire had faced. Even in defeat, they had left scars on the Imperial Navy, entire battle fleets lost to human ambushes, colonies burned in retaliation, and legends of soldiers who fought to their last breath. If the warship was human, then it meant one thing. Someone had been hiding, waiting. The Emperor himself listened to the report in private. His expression was unreadable, but his fingers tightened on the arm of his throne. "Find them," he ordered quietly, "and bring me proof. If this is humanity's doing, they will wish they had stayed in the shadows." Far from the capital, in forgotten corners of space, whispers spread among the slave colonies. Humans living under imperial rule heard rumors of a phantom ship that struck fear into the Empire. Some began to believe the impossible, that their people had returned to take revenge. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the mysterious warship drifted silently, its black hull blending into the void. It was not finished. Not yet. The Emperor's orders were clear: find the warship and destroy it. Admiral Varon assembled one of the fastest and most advanced strike fleets in the Imperial Navy. 30 warships, including heavy cruisers, stealth scouts, and missile frigates, were pulled from every corner of the border sectors. Their mission: hunt down the phantom ship before it struck again. The operation began with confidence. The fleet fanned out across known trade routes and hyperspace lanes. Every possible entry point was watched. Long-range sensors were pushed to maximum range, scanning for even the faintest trace of unusual energy. For weeks, they found nothing. Then, without warning, the phantom warship appeared, not near the fleet, but in a completely different sector. It struck a military outpost in the Vareth system, destroying its shield generators with a single beam. By the time nearby Imperial ships arrived, the warship was gone. Varon adjusted the fleet's position, tightening the net. But the same thing happened again. This time, it was a convoy of supply ships near the Sarin Belt. The warship appeared, destroyed the convoy's command vessel, and vanished before any counterattack could be launched. It was as if the enemy knew exactly where the Imperial fleet would be and deliberately chose to appear somewhere else. Frustration grew. The officers began to whisper that the Phantom was mocking them. Some believed it was invisible to sensors. Others thought it could jump through hyperspace without leaving a trace. Varon refused to admit defeat. He ordered trap missions. Small, vulnerable-looking ships were sent along dangerous routes, each hiding heavily armed escorts nearby. But the Phantom warship never took the bait. It ignored the traps completely, striking only at real targets. Communications hubs, supply depots, fuel stations, every attack was precise. Every strike weakened the Empire's reach in the border sectors, and always the pattern was the same: appear, destroy, disappear. The people began to give it a name: the Phantom of War. In taverns, on freighters, in slave camps, the stories spread. Some claimed it was the ghost of an ancient fleet. Others swore it was a human warship returning to punish the Empire. Inside the Imperial fleet, morale began to crack. One captain resigned his command after a close encounter, claiming the enemy wasn't a ship. It was death itself. Varon knew the truth. Whatever this phantom was, it was watching them, studying them, and until they could find a way to track it, they were fighting a ghost. But he also knew something else. Sooner or later, the Phantom would make a mistake. And when it did, the Empire would be ready. The pattern of attacks continued for months. No matter how hard Admiral Varon's fleet hunted, the Phantom warship was always one step ahead. It never stayed in one system for more than a few minutes. It never left debris from its own hull. And it never, until now, spoke a single word. That changed in the quiet hours before dawn in the Kara sector. An Imperial communications station floated above a barren moon, its massive antenna arrays scanning deep space for enemy signals. The crew were technicians, not soldiers, and their shifts were slow. Most of the time, the only messages they received were cargo schedules and fleet updates. But that night, the main console lit up with an incoming transmission. The signal was strange. Faint at first, then growing stronger, as if something was getting closer. "Commander," a young officer called out, "we're picking up—" "I don't know what this is. It's on an old frequency. No one uses it anymore." The station's commander frowned. "Put it on the main channel." The voice that filled the control room was not like any they had heard before. It was deep, cold, and carried an echo, as though it came from far away. The words were not in the standard Imperial language, but the station's translator worked quickly, converting the strange syllables into something they could understand. The message was short. "We remember. We have returned." A silence fell over the crew. No one spoke. No one moved. Then the sensors screamed. The Phantom warship appeared in orbit, less than 5 kilometers away. Panic erupted. The commander ordered the shields up, but before they could activate, the warship fired a single beam. It did not destroy the station completely. It simply took out the power grid, leaving the crew alive but helpless in the dark. Moments later, the warship sent the same transmission again. Only this time, the voice was clearer and the tone was sharper, filled with something unmistakable. Hatred. "We remember. We have returned." Then the ship faded away, leaving the station adrift. When news of the message reached the Emperor, he demanded to know the language it was spoken in before translation. The linguists hesitated, then admitted the truth. It was an ancient dialect of Earth's old tongues, long thought to be dead. The Emperor sat back in his throne, his expression unreadable. But inside he knew. This was no ghost, no pirate, no random attacker. It was human, and humanity had not forgotten what the Empire had done. The Emperor had heard enough. For months, the Phantom warship had destroyed colonies, supply lines, and military outposts without fear. Now it had sent a message in the language of Earth, a language the Empire had tried to erase. This was no longer just a threat. It was an insult to Imperial power. Orders spread through the military like fire. Every fleet within 20 sectors was to converge on the fortress world of Draxus Prime, a heavily armed planet known as the strongest military base in the border regions. If the Phantom ship appeared there, it would face the full force of the Empire's navy. Draxus Prime was built for war. Its surface bristled with planetary defense cannons, shield generators, and missile silos. The orbital space around it was a fortress of its own, dozens of massive battle stations, and thousands of fighters waited in silent formation. Admiral Varen stood on the command deck of his flagship, the ISV Dominion, watching the fleet assemble. "We will crush it here," he said to his second-in-command. "No matter how fast it runs, it cannot escape this net." The plan was simple. Bait the Phantom warship into attacking a convoy of high-value Imperial transports carrying rare minerals. These transports, however, were not real. They were heavily armored decoys, broadcasting false cargo data to lure the enemy. Hidden among the decoys were some of the Empire's deadliest ships, stealth cruisers with long-range ion cannons capable of disabling engines in a single shot. Above them, in high orbit, battle stations waited to unleash waves of missiles. Everything was in place. For 3 long days, the fleet waited in tense silence. The false convoy drifted near Draxus Prime, pretending to be vulnerable. Patrols circled the area, pretending not to notice. Every officer kept one eye on the long-range scanners, waiting for that familiar ripple in space. Then, on the fourth day, it happened. Sensors picked up an anomaly, a sudden distortion in the void, just beyond the orbit of Draxus Prime's moon. The readings were the same as the first encounter with the ISV Guardian. "It's here," Varen said, his voice low but sharp. "All ships, battle stations." The Phantom warship appeared. Its black hull absorbed the light of the distant sun. Glowing lines pulsed faintly across its surface. It did not hesitate. It moved toward the decoy convoy as if it had seen through the bait instantly. "Let it get closer," Varen ordered. "Closer." When the Phantom was within firing range of the convoy, Varen gave the signal. "Now, all ships, attack!" The trap was sprung. Stealth cruisers decloaked, ion cannons fired, and the battle stations rained missiles down from orbit. The void lit up with the fury of Imperial firepower. For the first time since it appeared in the galaxy, the Phantom warship was surrounded. But Admiral Varen had no idea that the battle about to begin would be nothing like he expected. The trap was perfect. On paper. In reality, the moment the Phantom warship turned its attention toward the Imperial fleet, perfection vanished. The first volley of ion fire struck the warship's hull and vanished. The beams, powerful enough to cripple a battleship in seconds, simply dissolved against its surface like rain on glass. The missiles followed, dozens of them streaking through space, their trails glowing white-hot. They struck the Phantom head-on, yet no explosion came. Instead, the missiles seemed to flicker and disappear, as though they had hit empty air. "Admiral." Varen gritted his teeth. "Full assault! Every ship! Fire everything!" The void erupted in chaos. Plasma bolts, laser beams, and missile barrages poured toward the Phantom warship. The combined firepower of the Empire's greatest fleet filled the darkness with light so bright it blinded the sensors. When the glare faded, the warship was still there, untouched. Then it moved. In a heartbeat, it was no longer near the decoy convoy. It was inside the Imperial formation, right in the middle of the fleet. Its weapons flared to life, and a single beam cut through 3 cruisers at once, slicing them apart as if they were made of paper. "Evasive maneuvers!" Varen shouted, but it was too late. The Phantom moved faster than anything in the Imperial. Records. It jumped from one position to another without warning, firing in short, precise bursts. Every shot counted, every shot destroyed. Battle stations exploded one after another, their burning debris raining into Draxus Prime's atmosphere. Fighters swarmed the Phantom, hoping to overwhelm it, but they were swatted from the void in seconds. The fleet was crumbling. "This is impossible," Varen's second-in-command whispered. It's not fighting like a ship. It's fighting like it knows our every move before we make it." Varen said nothing. His mind was already racing. This was more than just speed, more than firepower. It was strategy, intelligent, ruthless strategy. Whoever commanded that warship knew exactly how the Imperial Navy thought and how to break it. In less than an hour, the trap had become a slaughter. Half the fleet was gone. The rest was in retreat. The Phantom warship drifted toward the burning planet below. It did not fire on Draxus Prime cities, but instead targeted the central shield generator. One beam, one strike, and the planet's defenses collapsed. Then, as if to prove it could, the Phantom ship hovered silently above the capital for several long minutes. Every camera, every eye, every terrified voice on Draxus Prime witnessed it. And then it faded into the void, leaving the world and its broken defenders behind. The message was clear. The Empire's strongest fortress had fallen, and the Phantom had not even tried its hardest. The throne room of the Imperial Palace was silent. No music played, no guards moved. Even the air felt heavier than usual. The Emperor sat alone on his great black throne, the battle reports from Draxus Prime floating before him in glowing holographic panels. He had read them 3 times already, but each time, the same words returned to him like a blade twisting in his mind. Fleet destroyed. Defenses shattered. Enemy untouchable. It was not the loss of ships that disturbed him. The Empire had thousands. More. It was the way they were lost, swiftly, completely, without even harming the enemy. He had ruled for decades, crushing rebellions and conquering worlds with an iron hand. He had seen every kind of enemy, desperate rebels, cunning pirates, even other empires that had tried to challenge his rule. But this was different. This was personal. The image of the warship hung in the air before him. Black hull, glowing lines, moving with impossible speed. It was like nothing in the galaxy, except for one thing, the insignia found among the wreckage of Rivos 7, the old human symbol. The Emperor had been a young prince when the war for Earth began. He remembered the first reports, how humans had fought with reckless fury, refusing to surrender even when outnumbered and outgunned. They had built weapons in secret, hidden their fleets, and turned every battle into a trap. For a time, they had made the mighty Imperial Navy bleed. It had taken years to break them. Entire cities on Earth had been burned to ash. Billions had died before the humans finally fell. And when they did, the Emperor's father had scattered the survivors across the stars, determined to erase them as a people. But they had not been erased. The Emperor leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. If this phantom warship truly was human, then it meant that somewhere, hidden in the darkness, humanity had survived. Not just survived, but grown strong again. He could not allow that. Summoning his highest council, he spoke with cold precision. Double the patrols in every border sector. Intercept all unauthorized ships. Any human slave found speaking of rebellion is to be executed immediately. And bring me every record, every rumor, every fragment that speaks of human fleets. Some of his advisors shifted uncomfortably. One, a cautious old minister, dared to speak. Your Majesty, if they have such power now, perhaps it is too late to... The Emperor's gaze froze him mid-sentence. It is never too late to crush an enemy, the Emperor said quietly, and this enemy will be crushed before the galaxy begins to hope. But, deep inside, where no one could see, the Emperor felt something he had not felt in many years. Fear. It happened in the middle of the Imperial Day cycle. Across the Empire, on starships, in colonies, in marketplaces, every hollow screen and comm display suddenly went black. For a moment, people thought it was a technical fault. Then the blackness shifted, and an image appeared. A face. It was human. The man was middle-aged, his skin weathered, his jaw strong. Scars ran across his cheek and down his neck, and his eyes were cold and sharp. He wore black armor with a strange emblem on the chest, the same ancient Earth insignia found on the wreckage at Rivos 7. When he spoke, his voice was calm, but there was steel in every word. We are the children of Earth. All across the galaxy. People stopped to listen. Even the Emperor, seated on his throne, leaned forward. 3 centuries ago, your empire came to our world. You burned our cities. You enslaved our people. You scattered us to the edges of the stars. You thought you had destroyed us. The man's eyes seemed to burn brighter as he continued. You were wrong. The image shifted briefly, showing the phantom warship, the same black vessel that had destroyed fleets and shattered fortresses. Behind it, other ships flickered in the shadows, just far enough to be shapes, not details. We hid. We rebuilt. And now, we have returned. In the markets, whispers rose among the human slaves. On the mining worlds, workers froze, tools falling from their hands. On Imperial warships, officers exchanged uneasy glances. "We will not ask for peace," the man said. "We will not accept your mercy. We will take back what you stole. Every world you conquered from us will burn. Every chain you placed on our people will be broken." His voice dropped lower, but the words cut like a blade. "And we will not stop until the Empire itself is dust." The image blinked out. The hollow screens returned to normal. But the message had already spread, recorded, replayed, passed from hand to hand. In the Imperial Palace, the Emperor's hands gripped the arms of his throne so tightly the metal bent under his fingers. There was no more doubt. The Phantom Warship was human. And it was not alone. The message from the Phantom Warship had not been a warning. It had been a spark. Within hours, flames of rebellion began to spread across the Empire. On the mining world of Corin 8, human workers overpowered their overseers, taking control of the loading docks. In the factory cities of Veltra Prime, slaves seized weapons from storage and turned them against the guards. The uprisings were small at first, isolated pockets of chaos, but they were growing, and in almost every case, the same thing happened. Just when Imperial reinforcements were about to crush the rebels, the Phantom Warship appeared. It never stayed long. It would drop out of nowhere, destroy the lead Imperial ships, and vanish before the enemy could regroup. Sometimes, a second smaller black vessel would arrive, dropping crates of weapons and supplies before disappearing into the void. On Corin 8, a young miner named Jarrow looked up in awe as one of those crates landed beside him. Inside were sleek, black rifles, energy shields, and rations that would last for weeks. Stamped on every box was the same emblem, the old Earth symbol. The rebels began to chant it. "Earth lives! Earth lives!" Across the galaxy, Imperial commanders grew desperate. They tightened curfews, increased patrols, and executed suspected rebels on sight. But the more they tightened control, the more humans rose up. On the world of Trazia, a rebellion spread so fast that an entire Imperial garrison was wiped out in less than a day. The news shocked the Empire, not because the garrison had fallen, but because the attackers had been armed and coordinated as if someone had trained them for years. In the Imperial War Council, voices shouted over one another. "They are everywhere. We cannot fight a ghost fleet. They are more than a fleet. They are an army in the shadows. This is human revenge. We should have finished them centuries ago." The Emperor sat in silence, his gaze fixed on the glowing star map. Rebellions here, warship sightings there, supply routes vanishing without a trace. This was no random uprising. It was a plan, a war plan. And somewhere, hidden deep in the darkness, the humans were guiding it. The Emperor had waited long enough. The uprisings had to be crushed, fast, before they spread beyond control. He summoned his highest admirals to the war chamber, a vast hall of black stone where the star map of the Empire hung like a glowing web above them. The humans think, "They can challenge us," the Emperor said, his voice cold and sharp. "We will remind them what it means to defy the Empire." The plan was brutal. Entire sectors were to be locked down. No ship could enter or leave without Imperial clearance. Food shipments to rebellious worlds would be cut off. Any colony suspected of harboring rebels would be burned to the ground. And then came the heart of the strategy, Operation Iron Sky. 3 of the Empire's largest fleets would sweep through the outer rim, destroying every hidden base, every shipyard, every sign of human resistance. They would not stop until nothing remained. The offensive began at dawn. Over the planet of Corin 8, Imperial warships descended in a dark storm, blasting rebel defenses to ash. Cities burned. The air filled with the screams of the captured. On Veltra Prime, the great factory towers shook under heavy bombardment. Those who had shouted, "Earth lives," were dragged into the streets and executed. For a moment, it seemed the Emperor's plan was working. The uprisings began to falter. Rebel signals grew silent. The Phantom warship had not been seen for days. But then, on the 6th day, something unexpected happened. Over the frozen moon of Sereth, an Imperial fleet cornered a group of fleeing human rebels. Just as the kill order was given, a black shadow appeared in the distance, the Phantom warship. But this time, it was not alone. 5 more black ships slid out of the darkness beside it, their hulls bearing the same Earth insignia. The Imperial commander froze for half a second, long enough for the humans to strike. The battle that followed was chaos. The new ships fought with the same impossible speed and precision as the original warship, tearing through the fleet like a blade through paper. By the time the smoke cleared, nothing remained of the Imperial force but drifting wreckage. The message was clear. The humans were no longer hiding one ship. They had a fleet. The Empire had always been the hunter. Now, for the first time in centuries, it was the prey. The human fleet struck without warning. They appeared in the skies above Imperial worlds, hit their targets with deadly precision, and vanished before reinforcements could arrive. No supply line was safe. No fortress was untouchable. On the trade hub of Varan Station, Imperial merchants watched in horror as black warships tore through the docking ring, destroying every Imperial freighter in sight. In the Yorthus Belt, a hidden Imperial weapons depot exploded after a coordinated attack from 3 human ships working in perfect formation. Everywhere they struck, the humans left a mark, not just destruction, but hope. On liberated worlds, they freed human slaves and armed them. In captured outposts, they destroyed Imperial propaganda systems and replaced them with a simple broadcast, the Earth insignia, and the words, "We are coming home." The Empire fought back hard. Admirals sent out fast pursuit fleets. Trap systems were set up along likely attack routes. But the humans were always one step ahead. It was as if they could read Imperial strategy before it was even put into motion. Rumors began to spread among Imperial officers, whispers that the humans had spies deep inside the Empire itself. For the Emperor, this was intolerable. He ordered new fleets to be built, massive warships larger than anything the humans had shown so far. Factories worked day and night, and entire planets were stripped for resources. But every day, the Empire built, the humans destroyed. For every fleet launched, 2 were crippled. For every fortress reinforced, another was brought down in flames. The galaxy was changing. Neutral worlds that once feared the Empire now began to quietly send supplies to the human fleet. Smugglers carried messages, weapons, and even volunteer fighters across the borders. The Emperor knew what was coming. This was no longer a rebellion. It was a war for the future of the galaxy, and for the first time, the Empire was in danger of losing. The Emperor knew he could not keep fighting the humans like this. Every battle drained the Empire's strength. Every victory the humans won inspired more uprisings. So he decided on one final gamble. The plan was simple in theory: draw the human fleet into a trap so massive, so overwhelming, that escape would be impossible. To make it work, the Emperor needed bait, and he knew exactly what to use. Word began to leak across the galaxy. A key rebel stronghold had been discovered on the planet Dravos 4. The reports claimed it was the main base of human operations, the place where their fleet was being resupplied and repaired. The information was false, carefully planted by Imperial spies, but to make the illusion perfect, the Emperor even sacrificed an entire small fleet, letting it be destroyed near Dravos 4 so the humans would believe the planet was lightly defended. In reality, the system around Dravos 4 was a death cage. Hidden among the asteroid fields were 30 Imperial war fleets, each with orders to hold fire until the humans committed to the attack. New super dreadnoughts, fresh from the shipyards, waited at the edge of the system. Minefields had been seeded along the hyperspace exit points, and planetary defense cannons had been upgraded to tear through even the strongest shields. The trap was set. When the day came, Imperial scouts reported what the Emperor had been waiting for. The human fleet had entered the Dravos 4 system. Not just the original 6 ships. There were dozens. Black hulls glinted in the light of the distant star as they moved in formation toward the planet. The Earth insignia burned bright on every one of them. In the war chamber, the Emperor allowed himself a rare smile. "All fleets," he commanded, "prepare to close the jaws." The space around Dravos 4 fell silent, waiting for the order. The humans were moving straight into the kill zone. In moments, the trap would spring, and the war would end in Imperial victory. But the Emperor had forgotten one thing. The humans had been planning this war for centuries. The order had been given. 30 Imperial fleets began to close in on Dravos 4, their massive engines burning like suns. Planetary defense cannons powered up, minefields armed themselves, and super dreadnoughts locked weapons on the approaching human ships. It should have been the end. But on the bridge of the Phantom warship, Captain Arlen watched the trap form around them and smiled. "They took the bait," he said quietly. "Just like we wanted." The humans had known about the trap from the start. In fact, they had built their entire plan around it. As the Imperial fleets closed in, the black warships suddenly broke formation, scattering in every direction. The Imperial admirals thought it was panic until their sensors began screaming. Dozens of cloaked human ships, hidden in the asteroid fields, powered up their weapons. They hadn't come to attack Dravos 4 at all. They had come to destroy the fleets waiting to ambush them. The first wave of human fire ripped through the Imperial minefields, detonating them in a chain reaction that tore apart nearby destroyers. Then came the second wave. Torpedoes and railgun fire slamming into the dreadnoughts from behind. On the Imperial flagship, alarms blared. "Where did they come from?" a commander shouted. "They were here the whole time." Another answered, panic in his voice. The trap had flipped. The humans moved with deadly coordination, each strike crippling another fleet. Imperial ships tried to regroup, but the humans cut off their escape routes. Entire squadrons vanished in storms of fire and debris. In the middle of the chaos, the Phantom warship broke through the Imperial lines and headed straight for the Emperor's command ship. Boarding pods slammed into the hull. Human Marines poured inside, fighting their way through corridors of smoke and fire until they reached the throne room. The Emperor stood waiting, clad in dark armor, his eyes burning with fury. "You think you can destroy the Empire?" he demanded. "Captain." Arlen stepped forward, his rifle steady. "No," he said. "We're not here to destroy it." He took a step closer, his voice like steel. "We're here to end it." Moments later, the Emperor's flagship exploded, a brilliant fireball lighting up the skies of Dravos 4. The surviving Imperial ships fled. Across the galaxy, Imperial garrisons surrendered without a fight. The war was over, and in the quiet that followed, the humans sent a single broadcast to every world. Earth is free. Humanity is home.